Hello, welcome to Planet America's Situation Room. I'm John Barron.
I'm Licciardello, and we've got another situation.
After 21 hours of the highest level of talks between the United States and Iran, the two countries could not reach a deal to end the war.
They have chosen not to accept our terms.
President Trump announcing a Navy blockade of the Strait of Hormuz.
Iran's ceasefire hangs by a thread after marathon talks ended without a deal, and the US has vowed to impose their own blockade on the Strait of Hormuz.
Meanwhile, Hungarian voters have given Trump's favourite European, Viktor Orban, the boot. We're going to look at what this means for the US, Europe, and in fact the whole world. But first,
a week ago, President Trump was sounding increasingly frustrated with Iran's effective blockade of 20% of the world's oil supplies, leading to a surge in prices, a slide in the stock market, and this now infamous outburst.
Open the fucking strait, you crazy bastards, or you'll be living in hell.
And then, as the 48-hour deadline he'd imposed on Iran loomed, Trump's tone turned from exasperated to apocalyptic.
A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again.
Some heard that and feared that Trump was actually threatening Iran with a nuclear attack, a concern fueled by these comments from Vice President J.D. Vance.
They've got to know we've got tools in our toolkit that we so far haven't decided to use. The President of the United States can decide to use them, and he will decide to use them if the Iranians don't change their course of conduct.
The White House was asked directly whether this was a nuclear threat or not. Their cryptic response? Only the president knows where things stand and what he will do. It was at about that point that Democrats, including Jasmine Crockett, started drafting letters to the Vice President calling on him to invoke the 25th Amendment, which can remove a president from office, claiming it has become indisputably apparent to the American public that the president is deranged, likely suffering dementia. Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski said that Trump's threat cannot be excused, describing it as an affront to the ideals our nation has sought to uphold and promote around the world for nearly 250 years. Republican Congressman Nate Moran echoed that sentiment, posting on X, "This is not who we are." Then American-born Pope Leo weighed in, calling Trump's threat unacceptable.
Oggi, come tutti sappiamo, c'è stata anche questa minaccia contro tutto il popolo di Iran. E questo veramente non è accettabile.
And the pontiff clearly got under the president's skin, with Trump posting a lengthy attack on Leo on Truth Social earlier today, accusing him of being weak on crime and terrible for foreign policy, also accusing the Pope of being a politician and hurting the Catholic Church. And just in case you thought Donald Trump might be suffering from something of a God complex, he posted this image a short time later. But unacceptable threats or not, they seem to have worked to a point.
The president has just put out a Truth Social saying that there is a deal in the works with Iran, a 10-point plan, negotiating a settlement that includes the immediate opening of the Strait of Hormuz. We don't know what the other 10 points include.
And there has been a deal of uncertainty about what exactly is in Iran's 10-point plan, because several versions of the plan seem to be doing the rounds. Although, according to Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, the ceasefire was, quote, everywhere, including Lebanon, where Israel launched an invasion and airstrikes in response to attacks from the Iranian proxy Hezbollah. Iranian parliamentary speaker and reportedly Trump's pick to be the next Iranian leader, Mohammad Khalibaf, posted that Lebanon forms an inseparable part of the ceasefire because, he says, it is point one of the 10-point proposal. And yet Trump's Truth Social post agreeing to the Iran ceasefire did not mention Lebanon at all.
we should also note that while the Iranian 10-point plan did mention Lebanon, all Trump's original announcement said was that America had received a 10-point proposal from Iran and they believed it provided a workable basis to negotiate from, not that America was accepting any of that plan. In fact, Iranian Foreign Secretary Araghchi offered a mirroring statement saying that Iran's 10-point proposal was only the basis for negotiations, as was America's 15-point proposal. That was completely different from the Iranian one. So they're on the same page. There may be even more proposals out there, by the way, that aren't public. according to Carolyn Levitt.
The Iranians originally put forward a 10-point plan that was fundamentally unserious, unacceptable, and completely discarded. It was literally thrown in the garbage by President Trump and his negotiating team. Many outlets in this room have falsely reported on that plan as being acceptable to the United States, and that is false. They put forward a more reasonable and entirely different and condensed plan to the president and his team. President Trump and the team determined the new modified plan was a workable basis on which to negotiate and to align it with our own 15-point proposal.
Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made clear his view that the 2-week ceasefire does not include Lebanon. And then he set about proving his own point in deadly fashion.
Israel has made it abundantly clear that it does not consider Lebanon to be included in the regional ceasefire agreement, striking multiple locations across Beirut, including this residential tower in downtown, which has been levelled to the ground without warning.
The death toll in the Israeli attacks exceeding 300 people in what was the deadliest single day of this conflict. Vice President J.D. Vance, who's been playing an increasingly important role in negotiations, claimed that Iran must have just been confused.
I think this comes from a legitimate misunderstanding. I think the Iranians thought that the ceasefire included Lebanon, and it just didn't.
Room for misunderstanding. It was being put together in a hurry. But was that a breakdown in communication or not? The New York Times then reported the White House had already seen and signed off on the statement before the Pakistani Prime Minister, Mr. Sharif, posted it. And that post said the ceasefire covered everywhere, including Lebanon. Now, there's probably no great mystery here. The Wall Street Journal reporting that Israel wasn't formally part of the Iran negotiations and wasn't happy that it got word that a deal was finalised at a late stage. Hence, that massive attack on Lebanon just hours later.
You know, the truth might be more damning for both Trump and Netanyahu, John. According to CBS News, at least, President Trump had originally been told that the ceasefire would apply to the whole Middle East, and Trump agreed that that would include Lebanon. And Israel also agreed to the deal with a ceasefire in Lebanon, according to CBS News. But then, after the deal was done, Netanyahu called Trump and changed his mind. So if that is true, then that would be diplomatic sabotage. Although, having said that, Lebanon itself doesn't seem to care. Lebanon wants them all to mind their own business. The Lebanese Foreign Ministry said no party has the right to negotiate on Lebanon's behalf other than its government. And the state is ready for direct negotiations with Israel. Negotiations which Netanyahu has agreed to start as soon as possible. So it would be ironic if Israel and Lebanon created peace before America and Iran does.
Yeah, ironic and certainly not impossible at this point. Meanwhile, it did soon become clear last week that Iran wasn't keeping its side of the bargain either.
Months ago, we learned that Iran has closed the Strait of Hormuz. It seems that Israel's attacks against Hezbollah are behind its reasoning.
Vice President Vance is now leading US diplomatic efforts. An interesting choice following reports in the New York Times last week claiming that nobody in Mr. Trump's inner circle was more worried about the prospect of war with Iran or did more to try and stop it than the Vice President. So no prizes for guessing the source of that particular story, perhaps, Chaz, although as the Veep engages Iranians in peace talks, he may need more than just a Farsi interpreter to make sense of arguments like this one against Iran's nuclear enrichment program.
You know what? My wife has the right to skydive, but she doesn't jump out of an airplane because she and I have an agreement that she's not going to do that because I don't want my wife jumping out of an airplane. We don't really concern ourselves with what they claim they have the right to do. We concern ourselves with what they actually do. And I think the president's been very clear on the enrichment question. Our position on that has not changed.
Yeah, I'm not really following that analogy from JD there. And look, there was already plenty of confusion on this issue. Even before that analogy, Trump has clearly stated there will be no enrichment of uranium for Iran. But the versions of the ceasefire plans distributed in Farsi included an additional phrase that is not in the English edition, allowing enrichment for Iran's nuclear program. I don't know what Carolyn Levitt's mystery plan has to say about all that, John, but also confusing is the Strait situation. The Strait of Hormuz, that is, never really opened during the ceasefire, with only 8 container ships moving cargo to Iran allowed through, even on the first day. And Iran openly demanded that shipping companies pay them tolls in cryptocurrency for any oil tankers they want to get through. We're talking $1 per barrel of oil there. Empty tankers apparently could pass freely through. And what was Trump's response to all of this, given only 24 hours earlier he'd threatened to destroy the entire country if that strait wasn't reopened? He told ABC America's Jonathan Karl there might be a joint American-Iran venture to charge those tolls. He wanted in, describing it as a beautiful thing. I guess the guy really likes his tariffs, John.
Sure does.
Given all that confusion, it's probably not a surprise that 48 hours later, J.D. Vance couldn't find a way to make the peace talks work.
The bad news is that we have not reached an agreement, and I think that's bad news for Iran much more than it's bad news for the United States of America. So we go back to the United States having not come to an agreement. We've made very clear what our red lines are, what things we're willing to accommodate them on, and what things we're not willing to accommodate them on. And we've made that as clear as we possibly could, and they have chosen not to accept our terms.
So does that mean America starts bombing Iran again? We don't know.
No, we don't at this stage. We do know, though, that the clock is now counting down again on a US naval blockade aimed at stopping all ships from passing through the strait, while Iran maintains an agreement was actually just inches away when the US delegation packed up and left Islamabad after 21 hours of talks. Meanwhile, President Trump has made his disappointment in America's NATO allies abundantly clear in recent weeks, expecting partners in what is essentially a defensive alliance concerned with the threat of Russia to join in the US and Israeli attack on Iran.
You know, I wonder whether or not NATO would ever be there for us. So this was a great test, because we don't need them, but they should have been there.
But of course, Chaz, this isn't just about Iran. Trump has flirted with the idea of quitting the North Atlantic Treaty before.
Yeah, even last week, Trump was still hinting that he might take Greenland, as he called it, that big, poorly run piece of ice.
Well, with that hanging in the Arctic air, NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte, who's a former Dutch Prime Minister and has a reputation for being something of a Trump whisperer, he travelled to the White House to try and patch things up with the president, and the next day Rutte gave this insight into his latest talks with Trump.
He was disappointed yesterday, but we also had a very frank and open discussion amongst friends. But generally, I mean, I totally understand that over time, the US wants more and more to pivot towards the Indo-Pacific. This is one of the reasons why in Europe we have to step up.
A frank and open discussion is kind of diplomatic talk for a screaming match, but still, it seems there is no immediate breakup of the alliance expected. Still, there is an acknowledgement that the US is shifting away from its post-World War II stance in Europe. So, in that context, the outcome of this weekend's election in Hungary became hugely important. Hungary is a NATO member, but its leader for the last 16 years, Viktor Orban, is, well, very sympathetic to the Kremlin. He has opposed NATO's support for Ukraine since the Russian invasion, while at the same time, Orban's anti-immigration Christian nationalism has won him a lot of support from Trump's MAGA movement in the United States, including from Vice President Vance, who endorsed Viktor Orban in Budapest last week.
I don't expect, of course, the people of Hungary to listen to the Vice President of the United States. That's not primarily why I'm here. But I did want to send a signal to everybody, particularly the bureaucrats in Brussels who have done everything that they can to hold down the people of Hungary because they don't like the leader who has actually stood up for the people of Hungary. And I think it's important to say that.
And then, during a foreign policy speech where Vance again praised Orban, the Veep got his boss on the phone to add his support for Viktor, although it didn't go exactly to plan.
Let's hope he actually answers, but this is going to be very embarrassing. All right.
I'm sorry, the person you were trying to reach has a voicemail box that has not been set up yet.
Okay. Try one more time. Hello, Mr. President. How are you?
Hi. Hey, JD, could you give me a second? I'm just...
So first he got the voicemail, then he got the, hey JD, can you just give me a second? But look, maybe Trump wasn't screening his vice president. He was probably trying to keep the Iran ceasefire deal together. And he did then go on to pump up Orban's tyres for that crowd.
I love Hungary, and I love that Viktor. I'll tell you, he's a fantastic man. We've had a tremendous relationship, and he does a job. Remember this, he didn't allow people to storm your country and invade your country like other people have.
Well, no, although Viktor Orban was quite happy to let Russia invade Ukraine, cosy up to the Kremlin and limit EU support for Kyiv at the same time.
He sure was. We recently learned of a secret phone call where Orban allegedly told Putin, I am at your service. And Orban seems to have demonstrated that by having his foreign minister during breaks at EU meetings calling the Russian foreign minister to give him live reports of what was being discussed at the EU meetings and how he could respond to it all. Yet the Trump administration has been bending over backwards for Orban. Back in 2019, Rubio signed a letter that expressed concern about the steady corrosion of freedom, the rule of law and the quality of governance under Orban, according to assessments by, wait for it, the Conservative Heritage Foundation, amongst others, remember that name, and they were concerned about the close relationship between this NATO partner and Moscow. Yet Rubio recently visited Hungary to praise Orban.
President Trump is deeply committed to your success because your success is our success.
Similarly, last year, J.D. Vance was infuriated by the prospect of heads of state turning up during foreign elections.
You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October.
And yet this week, there was J.D. Vance.
The president loves you, and so do I, because you're such an important part of what has made Europe strong and prosperous.
On that note, the supposedly prosperous Hungary had the leading Central European economy 35 years ago, but today it has second-tier status with the 17th largest economy in Europe, even with the 13th largest population. So why is the administration supporting Orban? Is it because Orban has poured money into MAGA think tanks? Money which funneled Russian talking points to the American right, including through some payola to the aforementioned Heritage Foundation, who decided they liked Orban very much these days, soon before they published their Project 2025 manifesto, I might add. Or is the support because certain right-wingers view Hungary as a model for how a government can seize institutions to push a Christian viewpoint while punishing adversaries such as leftists, immigrants and sexual minorities? I don't know. I just know Trump has made his choice clear, declaring, get out and vote for Viktor Orban. He's a true friend, fighter and winner and has my complete and total endorsement for re-election as Prime Minister of Hungary. Well, it didn't work, John, because it seems like Orban's going down.
Certainly does. Orban's opponent, Peter Magyar, has not only won, but he's on track for a supermajority in Parliament, giving him potentially a lot of power to exert. For more on this, we spoke to Maria Snegovaya. She's a senior fellow of Eurasia and Russia at the Centre for Strategic and International Studies. Maria, Viktor Orban's defeat has been widely welcomed among Western European leaders. What does Peter Magyar's election mean for NATO, the European Union, and the defence of Ukraine as well?
This is one of the reasons why this election has been so closely watched by many observers, because Orban specifically was on repeated record, right, on trying to veto EU sanctions vis-a-vis Russia, veto some new funding available for Ukraine. There were constant issues pertaining to providing more support for Ukraine. He even blocked the funds towards Ukraine moving from Hungarian territory more recently, leaving Ukraine effectively without some of the EU money. There's no questions that the EU policy vis-a-vis Russia and Ukraine will become more coherent. I will also flag that in terms of Russia's interference in this election, which was a concern for many observers, right? The Kremlin allegedly delegated an entire team controlled from the presidential administration of Russia to back Orban. So that is something Magyar promised he will look into and will try to significantly reduce Russian presence in Hungary and its impact on Hungarian politics.
We've heard that democracy was degraded somewhat under Orban's rule over time. Is that something that the new administration can reverse easily, or will that need to be a long-term project?
Peter Magyar definitely claims and promises to crack down on corruption, and he has a lot of electoral promises, including joining the European Union's prosecutor office, specifically for Hungary to be able to crack down on these issues. He also has been able to secure this phenomenal two-thirds majority constitutionally, allowing him to implement really radical changes and maybe revert some of the previous illiberal changes that Orban's government has imposed. So potentially he has all the in tools. The big question is whether Peter Magyar will be willing to really use his power in order to return Hungary back to this liberal democratic track, despite his elite insider status.
Maria, given Viktor Orban's role as an inspiration for Donald Trump and the populist right in the United States and elsewhere, do you think it is right to see his defeat now as a predictor of where right-wing populism is heading in the US and beyond? Or should this election really be seen as being more about issues specific to Hungary itself and the corruption that has been associated with Orban?
So there's two dimensions here. Having studied comparative politics for quite some time, I'm a big believer of domestic factors really playing the main role in the election. Everything else comes second. So ultimately, American voters will decide their own election depending on how they feel domestically, economically. And that was also true of Hungary, regardless of the external support. Also, I will flag that ultimately, while Orban is defeated, right-wing political spectrum still won, because Peter Magyar is definitely not a classic left-leaning politician. He is a right-wing conservative who is quite anti-immigration oriented. He actually criticized Orban for accepting too many guest workers into the country. So by his standards, Orban is not anti-immigration enough. He definitely very strongly emphasizes the traditional pro-family agenda, and he has reasons to criticize Orban for not having delivered. So from most common standards, he is a right-wing politician and maybe less illiberal, maybe less populist than Orban, but that remains to be seen.
And how much do you think the American administration and maybe even the Russian administration might interfere with the incoming Hungarian government? Is there a danger that they might try to undermine the incoming Hungarian government?
I think that Trump's administration quite easily will find a lot of compromise and common ground with the new Peter Magyar's government. I do not anticipate a lot of clashes there, because I do not believe that Peter Magyar will embrace, very heavily, fundamentally radical vision for the reasons that he himself is relatively right-wing conservative leader. But when it comes to Russia, he openly promised a crackdown on Russian penetration of Hungary, which has reached tremendous levels. And ultimately, it really depends on Peter Magyar. Hopefully, he's a real patriot of his country. It's true sovereignty, and hopefully there will be some positive changes happening for both Hungary and the European Union in that regard.
First Lady Melania Trump, the Slovenian-born former fashion model, is more often seen than heard, so it caught many by surprise last week when she decided to make a statement.
The lies linking me with the disgraceful Jeffrey Epstein need to end today.
She went on to address various rumours that are apparently circulating somewhere on the internet.
I never been friends with Epstein. Donald and I were invited to the same parties as Epstein from time to time, since overlapping in social circles is common in New York City and Palm Beach.
Well, sure, maybe Epstein didn't introduce you to or traffic Melania as he did hundreds of girls and young women, which was apparently one of the rumours that she was responding to, but Donald admits that he was a close friend of Jeffrey Epstein for well over a decade. And this email Melania sent in 2002 to Epstein's then-girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, now of course serving 20 years in jail for sex trafficking and abuse, well, it sounded rather chummy. Dear G, how are you? Yada, yada, yada. Give me a call when you're back in NY. Have a great time. Love, Melania. The First Lady had this answer to that.
To be clear, I never had a relationship with Epstein, or his accomplice, Maxwell. My email reply to Maxwell cannot be categorized as anything more than casual correspondence.
So G is now Maxwell. Casual correspondence with somebody who has your phone number and you're close enough to sign off with love? All right. This email, though, it's been around for months, so even Fox News was baffled over the timing of this statement.
We've been trying to understand why she made it today, if there was something that she is reacting to that might already be in the news that has upset her, or if there's a story that's yet to come out that's about to drop that she wanted to get ahead of, because it did feel like it came out of left field for us.
And not just them, the First Lady's comments reportedly came as a surprise to people who work in the White House. President Trump claims he didn't know what the statement was, but he knew she was going to make it. So it is still a little bit of a head-scratcher, Chaz. Could it be that after weeks of wondering if the war in Iran was a deliberate distraction from the Epstein scandal, that Trump now wants the Epstein scandal to distract from the war? Maybe.
The timing does seem a little odd, I have to say. If a newspaper was about to break a story about Melania, we'd know about this Epstein story by now. That happened 4 days ago, that press conference, right? There hasn't been a peep since then. And the only explanation offered by Melania's people for the timing of her comments was that the First Lady spoke out now because enough is enough. That's not going to cut it. But there is an alternative explanation emerging online that I think is worth exploring. Melania's presser revolved around this claim.
Epstein did not introduce me to Donald Trump. I met my husband by chance at a New York City party in 1998.
But not everyone thinks it's that simple. Author Michael Wolff believes that Donald and Melania met in 1998 through a model's agent called Paolo Zampoli, who had ties to Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, and that Melania was very involved in Epstein's social circle, and that Epstein said the first time Trump and Melania had sex was on his plane. Now, that's an image I don't need. But that guy, Paolo Zampoli, is today very much part of Team Trump, acting as Trump's United States Special Representative for Global Partnerships, whatever that means. And he said he can clear this all up under oath. I'm ready to testify in Congress, he reportedly said, to say who introduced the First Lady. I'm ready to even bring another 50 witnesses to say they were present that night. The whole world knows this. This is old news. Note that Zampoli's story doesn't actually contradict Michael Wolff's claims, but who cares? Of course Melania knew Jeffrey Epstein to some extent. Like John said, she was dating Donald Trump at the time, who was Epstein's good friend. But Paolo Zampoli had ties to other models as well, like Amanda Ungaro, who arrived in New York when she was 17, flying in on Jeffrey Epstein's plane. Later that year, Ungaro met Paolo Zampoli and he persuaded her to move to America permanently before beginning a romantic relationship with her that would last 2 decades. Sadly, it ended with a nasty custody battle over their teenage son, and it was then that Zampoli learnt Ungaro had been arrested for fraud and was in a Miami jail. So, what did this knight in shiny armour do? He contacted the top official at Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, ICE, and told them Ungaro was in the country illegally. He suggested they put her in ICE detention, possibly to give him an advantage in his custody battle, and that's exactly what they did. She was held in ICE detention for a little over 3 months before she was ultimately deported, and Ungaro is pissed off. So late last week, she got on Twitter and she directed quite the spray at Melania Trump, including, "I will tear down your corrupt system even if it's the last thing I do in my life. I will go all the way. I am not afraid. Maybe you should be afraid of what I know, of who you are and who your husband is." And then she added, "I have nothing left to lose in my life. I'll tear down the entire system. Be careful with me, bitch." Now, I've got no idea what she's referring to there. But those threats were sent to Melania only hours before Melania called that mysterious press conference. So I would be very surprised if they weren't related. I should say those tweets have now been taken down, but I doubt very much the story is going away.
A lot of folks are asking themselves, when are we going to the moon next? Oh my goodness gracious me, look at this. 10, nearly 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, number 1. Hello, up like a rocket. Up like a rocket now. Hello, up like a rocket now. Way, way up. Wave, adios amigos, goodbye, see you later. Oh my goodness gracious, holy cow, holy smokes, holy Toledo. We're even getting higher than the highest of heights.
You are no go for toilets.
Oh my goodness gracious, what a disaster.
You are go for all types of uses of the toilet.
This result will make their stomachs feel quite good indeed. Hot, 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 like a summer heat wave. I mean, just take a look here. Hello, down he goes. Now look at this. Down we go. Woo! Down underwater we go. Maybe he is as low as he possibly can go. Holy smokes, folks.
And that is it for another trip to Planet America. We'll be back at the same time next week and any time you like on ABC iView, YouTube and Facebook.
And there's another Planet Extra Pep podcast out right now where we discuss, amongst other things, the Artemis II space mission and a huge case at the Supreme Court. See you there.
Bye-bye.